Hey everybody, Peter Zeihan here coming to you from Colorado. Today we're talking about Iran because if you've been watching the news lately, you've seen something remarkable on the streets of Iranian cities. Crowds chanting, "Death to the dictator." Not death to America, not death to Israel, but death to their own supreme leader. So the question everyone's asking is obvious. Is the Islamic Republic finally on the verge of collapse? The short answer is that the regime is weaker than it's ever been, but weakness and collapse are two very different things. Let me explain. First, let's understand why Iran is under so much pressure right now. Start with the economy. Western sanctions have absolutely crushed the Iranian economy. Inflation is running somewhere between 40 and 50%, depending on whose numbers you trust. The currency has lost most of its value. Youth unemployment is north of 30%. And for educated young people, it's even worse. When you have an entire generation that can't find work, can't afford housing, can't build a life, you have a recipe for instability. Then there's the regional picture. Iran spent decades building a network of proxy forces across the Middle East. Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, militias in Iraq and Syria, the Houthis in Yemen. This was Iran's way of projecting power without direct confrontation. But look at what's happened. Hamas has been devastated. Hezbollah has been significantly degraded. The Assad regime in Syria, Iran's closest ally, has fallen. Iran's entire regional strategy is in ruins, and they spent billions of dollars and decades of effort building it. Now add the demographic factor. Iran had a massive baby boom after the 1979 revolution, and those kids are now in their 30s and 40s. They don't remember the revolution. They don't buy the ideology. They've grown up with the internet, they've seen how the rest of the world lives, and they're not interested in sacrificing for a theocracy that offers them nothing. The regime knows this, which is why they've become increasingly repressive. But repression only works until it doesn't. So why hasn't the regime collapsed already? Two words: Revolutionary Guards. The IRGC isn't just a military force, it's an economic empire. They control somewhere between 30 and 40% of the Iranian economy. Construction, telecommunications, oil and gas, import-export, you name it. The guards have every incentive to keep this system going because they're getting rich from it. As long as the IRGC stays loyal, the regime survives. That's the iron law of Iranian politics. Here's the thing, though. Supreme Leader Khamenei is 85 years old. He's been in power since 1989, and there's no clear succession plan. His son, Mojtaba, is positioning himself, but he lacks the religious credentials and the personal authority his father built over decades. When Khamenei dies, and that could happen any day now, there's going to be a power struggle. The IRGC will try to install someone they can control. The clerical establishment will push back, and that moment of uncertainty is when things could get very unpredictable. What about external pressure? The Trump administration has made it clear they want maximum pressure on Iran, and with the regional proxy network in shambles, Iran is more isolated than ever. There's been talk in Washington and Tel Aviv about military strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but the Iranians have to take it seriously. And if they're dealing with internal unrest and external military threats simultaneously, that's when regimes make fatal mistakes. Let me give you two scenarios. Scenario 1. The regime muddles through. Khamenei lives a few more years. The IRGC keeps the population under control. Sanctions hurt but don't break the system. And Iran continues as a weakened but surviving authoritarian state. This is actually the most likely outcome in the short term, maybe 60% probability. These regimes are surprisingly resilient, and the opposition is fragmented and leaderless. Scenario 2. Something breaks. Maybe it's Khamenei's death triggering a succession crisis. Maybe it's an Israeli strike that the regime can't respond to effectively, humiliating them domestically. Maybe it's another protest movement that this time the IRGC refuses to crush. Once the fear barrier breaks, once people believe the regime can actually fall, everything changes fast. Probability in the next 12 months? Maybe 25%. But that number goes up every year. Here's what to watch. First, any signs of splits within the IRGC or between the guards and the clerical establishment. Second, Khamenei's health and any succession maneuvering. Third, how Iran responds if Israel or the U.S. takes military action. And fourth, whether protests reach a critical mass where the security forces can't or won't contain them. The Islamic Republic has survived for 45 years by being brutal and being lucky. They're still brutal, but their luck is running out. The question isn't really if this regime falls, it's when and how messy it gets.